In this section, we're going to bring in a second function block that I created here, but create an instance of it within our function block example. So the first function block that we made. And I just want to demonstrate how the call options come up and give us a different set of options now, and also what those options mean, and how we can store the instance data of our second function block within the instance data of our first function block, and also what that means. So here I've created FB2 example, and if I go into it, it's very, very simple. Just one Boolean input, one Boolean output, and some logic that just inverts the input and passes it to the output. And we're going to call this, unlike what we did with function block example, where we called it in our OB1, we're going to call it inside our function block example. So exactly the same thing. I drag it in and I want to call it here. And we get the same call options box where we can choose single instance, but we don't want single instance. We want this to be owned by our function block example. So we're creating a dependency and a sort of call hierarchy that when our function block example is called, we want to also call function block 2 example, and we want function block example, our FB1, to own the information for FB2. We click multi-instance, and when I click OK, you'll see that in our static, which is the information relative to this instance, we have created a FB2 example instance, and the data type is FB2 example. And if I open this, we'll see input 1 and output 1. In our logic area, we can see now that we have a call to function block 2 example, and we can see that we have our input and output 1 interface. And this isn't a very good place to actually put this, so I'm going to move this onto this line down here. And I'm going to say if our static one is passed to the input, then I want to create a new output called output 3, which is a Boolean again. And I'm going to put on the comments that this is an inverse of static 1. I mean, this is a really basic example and something that is very unlikely that you'd ever do. But for this purpose, this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to drag that onto there. And then I'm going to come out to my main. And we'll notice that these are red. And this means that they need updating because I've changed the interface. So I can right click, update block call. And it'll tell me what the changes are. We can see that we now have a new output 3. And I need to update this one as well. And for those wondering straight away, what if we'd use this 100 times? You can just click the download button and it will do all of this automatically, but it won't give you the opportunity to check, which can be important. And now we can see that we have output 3. And if I go into my function block example, and have a look at the data set, we can now see that in our static, we have this FB2 example, input 1, output 1. And that means that our function block 2, the information relating to it exists in the instance data for our function block 1 or function block example. And therefore, we could have different data in these fields in our second instance of our first function block. Again, quite hard to get your head around if you're new to all of this, but I promise it will make sense eventually. And basically all I'm saying is that you have the choice of where you want to keep this function block data. If I go back to my main, I can still create an instance of FB2. I can only choose single instance, and I can still create a new function block for FB2 example. And if I come in here, we'll see that we only have input 1 and output 1 because that's all function block 2 actually is. I hope that makes sense. And I just want to touch on the last call option, Whoops, I'm getting lost here. So function block example, if I create a new instance of FB2 in here, so this is the second call to FB2 in our main function block, I'm going to choose parameter instance. And we'll notice that this time it automatically gets put into our in out. And if I come to main and I update this function block, you can see that it's created a new FB2 example instance. And I'll update this one as well. And now what it wants is a pointer to a memory area. So we could put in there this data block here. And both of them could use this same data block. If I move this to this side, this would mean that whatever is set in this function block 2 example and stored in this data block is shared with both of these, because these function blocks, through the by reference interface or the in-out interface, can see the information stored in this data block. And there aren't that many scenarios where I've had to use the parameterized instance, but it can come in really, really handy for things like batch processing, where you might have different recipes that you're sending to a function block, and each of those recipes are made up in another function block which handles how that recipe is built. But typically speaking, we're getting into complex areas that require that sort of interfacing. But at a basic level, it's good to know that it's there. So I hope that all makes sense. And yeah, if there is anything that doesn't make sense in this, because it is quite complex this early on, just drop messages in the comments below this lesson, and I will do my best to iron that stuff out.